It may be difficult to believe, but it's true. Europe just spent 500 billion euros on fighter jets that never took off. In fact, it is fair to say that these fighter jets don't even exist. That is in far contrast to the American jets that are currently ruling the skies. These jets are so advanced, you could almost claim that they are out of the latest science fiction movie. Suffice it to say, what you are about to hear will make you laugh, cry, and, if you are American, feel really, really proud. This is because today we're breaking down not one, not two, but three unbelievable European programs that ended up being three disasters, with each one proving to be even more embarrassing than the last. We will also be showing how one country, that country being the United States of America, always wins. Europe's broken dreams. Following the end of the Third Reich and the prevention of their leaders' aspirations to conquer Europe, the world was still reeling from the atrocities committed by Adolf Hitler and the Wehrmacht. Now that the Heer, that is the army, the Kriegsmarine, which could also be referred to as the Nazi Navy, and the Luftwaffe, that is the Nazi Air Force, had lost their leader, the rest of the world decided that the likes of Hitler and those who fought for him will never see the light of day again. Eager for self-reliance, the European leaders also made a vow to themselves. Never again will we depend on America. Sure, they were grateful that their friends from across the pond came in when they did. But that was not good enough for the leaders of Europe at the time. They swore that they would rise in from the ashes, and they would build their own defense industry. That way, they will stand tall among their peers on the global stage. As valiant as that may sound, this dream was easier said than done. At the end of the day, this would age worse than sushi left in a glove compartment. The simple truth about this is that Europe wasted this enthusiastic zeal by spending the next 7 decades trying but failing to break free from American military independence. Sure, some politicians would periodically take the podium to wax lyrical about building the future of the European Air Force, but time and time again this dream fizzled out. When it was time for action, we found that engineers were left out to hang and dry because of bloated budgets, deadlines that were never met, and in the end, a catastrophic collapse of a dream under its own weight. When we look back, the simple truth seems to be that politics always appears to trump engineering, at least in Europe. This is because as Europe was going through its failure to deliver on its jet planes, American companies such as Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman got to work building their innovative fighter jets. While they knew that they were expected to deliver without any excuses, their counterparts in Europe let their fighter jets program fall into the hands of politicians who were only interested in using the program for their own propaganda. Every politician from every country wanted to claim a piece of their pie for their own nation. Germany wanted more jobs for its workers. After all, the war their future had plagued for the better part of a decade or so had devastated the economy of the country. France insisted that it must claim leadership of the program for themselves. Spain wanted to use it to gain more influence in Europe. The list is endless. The most frustrating part of it all, at least from the perspective of Europeans, is that by the time it was all said and done, and even was happy with what they may consider to their fair share, the jet ended up being something that can only be described as a Frankenstein monster designed by committee. Comment, reality check, if you think Europe bit off way more than it could chew. The really depressing part of it all, at least from the European perspective, is that as this was taking place in Europe, the Americans were busy at work. As they say, while Europe dreams, America builds. As the Europeans bicker on about who does what, the American pilots are zooming past the clouds in stealth jets that Europeans can't even detect on their outdated radar. The funny part of it all is that this is only where the humiliation begins. The saddest part? While Europe talks, America acts. While Europe dreams, America builds. And while Europe keeps arguing over who gets to be in charge, American pilots are flying stealth jets that Europe can't even detect on radar. France versus Germany, the ultimate disaster. One of the biggest case studies as to why the European fighter jet program never really took off is what happened when France and Germany decided that they were going to build a fighter jet together. Whose bright idea was that? The two countries had just spent the better part of a decade at each other's necks. Heck, they couldn't even agree on the best way to cook a potato, but they thought that they would be able to come together so that they could design the most advanced warplane in human history? Can't lie, the thought is almost as laughable as the execution of their plans. One of the funniest parts of the entire thing is that on paper, the plan seems simple enough. Dassault Aviation, the Paris-based aerospace company that was built in 1929, and Airbus, the German aerospace giant that was established in 1970 to compete with U.S. giants such as Boeing and Lockheed, were going to come together so that they could create the Future Combat Air System. Also known as FCAS, this jet was believed to be what would put Europe at the fore when it came to the manufacturing of fighter jets. Unfortunately, this dream would never come to fruition. Instead, it would just prove to be another reason from the French and the Germans to squabble. Rather than focusing their energy on performance, Dassault seemed to focus on wringing control of the software and the flight systems from their German counterparts. On the other hand, Airbus clung on to their demands for leadership of the overall design. As time went on, it became clear that neither side was going to compromise on their demands. As a result, the engineers could never really get to work as they were always being pulled in different directions. To make matters worse, the budget seemed to lose control of themselves, and the nightmare looked like it would never end as the deadlines kept on slipping to the point where they are now in the 2030s. Again, the funniest thing about the entire thing is that the Americans were probably being entertained by all this while they were still hard at work building their own fighter jets that proved to be determining factors in conflicts. One thing that must not be lost is that when this project started, it was only supposed to have a budget of about 100 billion euros. Well, all the meddling ended up costing Europe big because now the budget has ballooned up to a whopping 500 billion euros. The most annoying thing about the entire situation is that they still have nothing to show for it. French viewers, explain in the comments how your government managed to throw away €500 billion. Germans, feel free to defend Airbus if you can. When it comes to it, it is clear that the entire thing has been more entertaining, a progressive. The meddling has resulted in the crippling of the European fighter jet. Meanwhile, their American cousins have rolled out amazing fighter jet after amazing fighter jet. Just take a look at the F-35 Lightning II, a fighter jet that has proved itself to be the most produced fifth-generation fighter jet in history. Not only have thousands of pilots raced through the skies in it, hundreds of them are operational all over the world. A damn shame, too, because Dassault and Airbus are still squabbling about who rides shotgun in a plane that doesn't even exist. Britain's post-Brexit panic project. As if the FCAS program was disastrous enough, just wait till you hear about what happened in Great Britain. Everyone who voted in favor for Brexit must be kicking themselves right now, but wait till they hear about what it did to Britain's aerospace aspirations. This is hilarious because once upon a time, the UK had actually dreamed of becoming a leader in Europe when it came to the creation of the next-generation fighter jet project. However, that dream essentially dissolved into nothingness when they decided that they had had enough of the European Union. With the likes of France and Germany now in the past, Britain embarked on Project Tempest. With a name like that, it was clear that the British wanted to inspire fear and dominance with their project, but unfortunately, all they would inspire is ridicule. One of the most glaring consequences of Brexit is that they now had no major partners in Europe. What this meant is that they had essentially embarked on a project that had no budget. As such, they had to resort to begging other countries for money. They even made their way to the Far East so that they could see if they could get some assistance from Japan. Tragic stuff too, because the British defense spending had left the vault empty. As a result, we found the BAE Systems, the company that led and organized the program, earned a reputation for over-promising and under-delivering. As time went on, the Tempest is still nothing more than a CGI concept. The British were forced to watch with empty pockets as their cousins across the pond were already zipping through the skies in the B-21 Raider, the fighter jet that was purported to be the stealth bomber of the future. British viewers, was leaving the EU worth losing your fighter program? Comment below. The truth of the matter is that the British dream was nothing more than that, a dream. Far from ever becoming the leaders of the next wave of fighter jets in Europe, now they are just a country begging for alms so that they could put a semblance of a fighter jet together. Pitiful to say the least. The Typhoon curse strikes again. As bad as these catastrophic fighter jet programs were, they pale in comparison when it comes to what happened to the Eurofighter Typhoon. Apparently, this was supposed to be one of the most important achievements when it came to European fighter jets. However, it would become the poster child for exactly what not to do when it is time to design a fighter jet. This time, Germany, Britain, Spain, and Italy thought they would be able to come together to make this great thing work. However, signs of problems sprouted when each participant decided that they must have their own share of the production. History would prove that the four countries would spend so much time squabbling about who gets to do what, but by the time their jet was completed, it was already outdated. They could only sit and watch as the Americans and their fighter jets set the pace for what a fighter jet should be able to do. The most hilarious part of it all was that the Typhoon was more difficult to maintain than it was to fly. Can you imagine? After spending all that time and effort building the Typhoon, the only disturbance it would cost is to the pockets of the owners, as they could never find spare parts due to how outdated it was, and that upgrades would eventually set these countries back by billions of euros. Tragic stuff. Type committee curse in the comments if you agree too many cooks spoil the fighter jet. Why America always wins. Looking at all the failures that the Europeans have experienced, we can only wonder how one country was able to surpass an entire continent. Looking at the different factors that come to play, the only conclusion that we can come to is that the real difference lies in the numbers. While America is just one country, this gives it a massive advantage over Europe because it is united within itself. As it is one country, they can maintain one vision as a nation. That is the creation of one dominant air force. The proof is in the pudding when the US decided to build one fighter jet. They worked a lot faster than their European counterparts because they did not spend an entire decade arguing about who does what country gets what contract, and which factory gets the jobs. All of that is clear and precise as only one nation descends on the factors that come into play. Add the ability to fund the programs and hold the companies working with them accountable, and you can see how the US is able to dominate the skies with ease. Just take a look at the amazing results that they have been able to achieve in the past. When we think about it, we just cannot ignore fighter jets such as the F-22 Raptor. Considered to be the deadliest air-to-air fighter jet that has ever been built, it is a testament to American fighter jet engineering. Then there is the F-35 Lightning II, a fighter jet that is considered to be one of the most important planes in the NATO Airpower arsenal. Let's also not forget about the B-21 Raider, a stealth bomber that has dominated the state of warfare in recent times and is believed to be capable of rewriting the future of warfare as we know it today. Add the future F-47 next-generation fighters to the mix, and you can see how the US isn't ready to give up their dominance of the skies just yet. Comment your favorite American fighter if you're proud of our aerospace dominance. So while Europe can't get a grip of itself, the US continues to give us hit after hit after hit. That is why Europe continues to linger in the past while the US is racing to the future in its state-of-the-art fighter jets. Europe's humiliating future. Looking back, the simple truth is clear. European air forces will eventually fly American jets. The only other alternative will be that they will not fly at all. We are not being dramatic. It is clear that the industrial skill that once made Europe a giant in this industry is fading away. Right now, their best engineers are heading over to the US so that they could work with the best companies. At the same time, the factories in Europe are closing down, meaning that they will never be able to create anything as great as their counterparts in the US. Add the fact that NATO has dropped the act to fully assume its identity as America and friends, and we can finally call it as it is. Europe is slowly but surely losing its ability to lead. Now they will be more concerned about buying American jets on credit. Predict in the comments, will Europe ever build a successful fighter jet again? At the end of the day, it is clear that this is what happens when American innovation is paired with American determination. One vision, one mission, one unstoppable aerospace industry.